Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Marked twice, loved once. Episode 7. Chapter 72. Nora's POV. Slowly, I opened my eyes and realized I was in comfortable arms. I lifted my head to look at him and saw that he was awake. "Good morning, Lord Madison," I greeted and heard him groan. "Madison, call me Madison," he pleaded and placed a kiss on my forehead before pulling away. I watched him leave the bed and walk up to the window while I stared at him. He has a body that would make any woman drool. I watched him open the window, take a deep breath, and turn to face me. "It's Sunday morning, so what should we do?" he asked, and I smiled before leaving the bed. "I want to go to the beach," I said, and he nodded with a smile. However, I noticed he had a sad expression on his face, which got me worried. "What's wrong?" I asked, and he remained silent for a moment before speaking. "I can't believe that all of this will be over after today," he grumbled, while I sighed and moved over to him. "It's not over yet. You will get to be with me on Tuesday and Thursday," I assured him, but he sighed and pulled me into a hug. I melted in his arms and noticed my wolf howling in comfort. We stayed in each other's arms for a while until I was the first to pull away. I held his gaze and saw the worried look on his face. "I don't want to share you. I want you all to myself. Please stay with me and end this game. I promise to love you and give you all the happiness in the world, Nora. Please stay with me," he pleaded, but I shook my head. "I understand that you are confused, but what is there to be confused about?" he asked, while I furrowed my eyebrows, waiting for him to finish his words. "You definitely can't choose Alpha Leo over me," he said, and his words irritated me. "Alpha Leo showed you nothing but pain. He impregnated your sister and had a baby with her. He was even ashamed to let people know that you are his mate. So tell me, what has changed? What makes you think he will not behave badly?" he asked, while I frowned at him, but he continued. "I know Leo's types of girls. He likes slender women, just like Vera. What makes you think he has changed?" he asked and moved closer to me. "Be with me, Nora. I promise." "Stop this, Lord Madison," I cut in, furious and irritated by his words. "Why are you being so selfish?" I asked, and he looked away. "I have already set a game, a fair one at that, and from what I know, it's already in your favor. So why are you trying to play mind games with me?" I asked and heard him sigh. "All the things you've said about Alpha Leo, I know them all, and you don't have to remind me," I said and began walking away but stopped and turned to him. "If you are confident that you are the right man, then wait until the contest is over," I said and walked into the bathroom. With a deep sigh, I sat in the tub and pondered my thoughts. The contest hasn't even gone anywhere, and matters are already arising. What should I do? I murmured, and my thoughts drifted to Alpha Leo and then to Lord Madison. I had so many thoughts in my head, and it was making me go insane. "Take a deep breath," Lolita urged, and I did as told. After controlling my emotions, I took off my clothes and stood in the shower. I enjoyed a warm bath and wrapped a towel around my chest before leaving the bathroom and entering the empty room. "He's probably downstairs," Lolita said, and I nodded, feeling guilty for the way I spoke to him. After dressing in a flowery dress and a black jacket, I let my hair fall on my shoulders and left the room. As I descended the stairs, a sweet aroma wafted from the kitchen, and I assumed it was Louis. But, when I arrived at the kitchen, it wasn't Louis but Lord Madison. When he noticed my presence, he turned and greeted me with a weak smile. "Have a seat, "It's almost ready," he said, and I stared at him in surprise before taking a seat at the dining table. "He's perfect," Lolita praised, and I blushed, watching him bring the meal to the table. He placed a plate in front of me and another on his side of the table. "Thanks," I said, eyeing the breakfast plate with curiosity. "I didn't know you could cook," I remarked, and he chuckled. "My wife usually drags me to the kitchen whenever she feels like cooking. On that day, she will dismiss all the cooks, and we had the kitchen to ourselves." He paused and let out a heavy sigh. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be talking about her," he apologized, but I shook my head with a smile. "It's okay. I'm comfortable with it," I replied truthfully and began eating my food. We ate in comfortable silence, occasionally stealing glances at each other, until we finished our meal. "I'll clear the table," I offered, and he nodded. "I'll go take a bath," he announced, and I hummed in acknowledgement. I cleared the table and placed the plates in the dishwasher before connecting with Maxwell through a mind link. "Nora, how are you?" "I'm fine," I responded with a sigh. "What's wrong?" he asked, sounding worried, and I remained silent before speaking. "It's exhausting, Maxwell. I don't think I can handle it," I grumbled, and Maxwell stayed silent for a moment before responding. "Do you want to come back?" he asked, but I sighed and took a seat. "And what difference would it make, Maxwell? They will both come for me," I grumbled with a sigh and gently massaged my forehead. Maxwell remained silent for a moment before speaking again. "I believe you love one of them. Why don't you choose him and save yourself this stress?" he suggested, but I shook my head. "I don't have feelings for anyone," I said with a frown, and Maxwell scoffed. "Stop deceiving yourself, Nora. You are in love, but the problem is, who is it?" he asked, and I couldn't give an answer. Lord Madison's POV, I lay down on the sun lounger, feeling the warmth of the sun and the cool breeze from the ocean. I looked over at Nora, who was lying beside me with her eyes closed, lost in thought. She had been this way since we left the house, and I blamed myself for it. I shouldn't have allowed my emotions to get the better of me. I shouldn't have urged her to choose me, and now my silly mistake is costing me. After a few minutes of silence, I decided to break it. "Nora," I said softly. "Are you still mad at me for what I said?" She opened her eyes and shifted her gaze towards me. "I'm not," she responded with a weak smile and looked away. I watched her stare at the sea, admiring the people inside. "Do you want to go in?" I asked, and she responded with a smile. "But I'm scared of the waves," she grumbled while I chuckled and stood to my feet. "Come with me," I said, stretching out my hand to her. She smiled, took it, and left the bed. As she stood before me, I couldn't help but run a lustful gaze over her curvy shape in the swimsuit. "Stop staring," she blushed and began walking away while I strolled behind her, stealing a glance of her behind. "Pervert," Darren mocked, and I scoffed and looked away. We got to the water, and Nora hesitated for a while, but she summoned up the courage and followed my lead. We entered the water until it reached Nora at her stomach. "This is great," she spoke excitedly, dived into the water, and came out a moment later. "Whoa," she exclaimed and dived again while I chuckled and watched her having fun. I joined her in the water, and we both had fun, but as the sun began to set, we returned to our beach chairs. Nora sat beside me, her wet hair clinging to her face. I smiled at her, and she leaned against my shoulder and tightly shut her eyes. "Mine." Darren howled in my head while I heaved a deep breath and inhaled her scent deeply. A few hours later, we were seated on the long couch, watching a movie in the sitting room while Nora placed her head on my shoulder. We fixed our gaze on the screen until Nora looked up and held my gaze. "Can I ask you something?" she asked, and I nodded, urging her to go on. "I wanted to know a few things about you, so do you mind sharing?" she asked, and I nodded. "What do you want to know?" I asked, and she sat up and faced me. "You are a hybrid, half vampire, half werewolf?" she asked, and I smiled. "Not really," I responded, and she furrowed her eyebrows. "My mother is a werewolf, and my father is actually a hybrid. His father is a vampire by birth, and his mother is a werewolf," I explained, and she nodded. It was obvious all this while she thought my father was just a vampire. "What else do you want to know?" I asked, and she hesitated for a while. "Go on," I urged, and she nodded. "Your mother, where is she?" she asked, and I quickly responded. "She's in her house back in Francisco," I replied. "She doesn't live with you?" she asked, and I smiled weakly. "I'm actually not on good terms with her." "Because of the death of your sister?" she asked, and I nodded with a sigh. "You need to let it go. I believe she is also in pain. She lost a daughter, and now she is losing you. Please talk to her," she pleaded. I smiled and placed a kiss on her forehead before cupping both her cheeks with my hands. "How can I say no to you?" I said, and she beamed and sealed her lips with mine. I kissed her passionately and pulled her closer by the waist. She moaned in the kiss and ran her hands from my shoulders down to my stomach, stopping at my groin. We broke the kiss, and she gave me that pleading look that I knew too well. "No," I shook my head and held her hand. "Please, I really want to experience it," she pleaded, and I shook my head. "I have told you that I only like ladies to do it if I want to be in the mood, but with you, I'm already in the mood, so I see no need for it," I pleaded, and she nodded and took her hand away. "I'll go get water," she said and left while I sat with a sigh and watched her leave. "What are you doing?" Darren questioned, and I sighed. "If you don't let her do it, then Leo would," he said, and his words made realization hit me, and I became jealous, picturing her giving Leo a blowjob. I left the couch and walked over to the kitchen, where I met her taking out a bottle of water from the fridge. "Do you need anything?" she asked, and I nodded and made my way to her. I pulled her to myself by the waist and sealed our lips for a kiss before pulling away. "I want you to pleasure me," I said, and she looked confused for a moment. "I thought you didn't, I'm sorry," I apologized, and she smiled shyly and held my gaze for a moment before getting down on her knees before me. We held each other's gaze as she slowly unbuckled my belt and unzipped my pants. She started, not like a professional, but it was the best blowjob I had ever had. I noticed I might too quickly in her mouth, so I gently pulled out of her and pulled her up to her feet. I lifted her up from the floor by the waist and made her sit on the countertop before sealing my lips with hers. I kissed her passionately but also hungrily. We both pulled away to catch our breath, and I held her gaze, seeing her beaming at me. "What?" I asked, but she didn't give an answer. Instead, she pulled me into a hug and whispered into my left ear, "I think I like you, Lord Madison." "Alpha Leo's POV, are you going somewhere?" Mother asked as she saw me walking down the stairs. "Yes, Mother," I responded and headed for the door, but her next words stopped me. "Are you okay?" she asked and stood before me. "Leo, you don't seem okay." "I'm your mother, and I can feel it," she said with concern, but I didn't respond. "Does it have to do with Nora? Has she chosen to be with Madison?" she asked, still no response from me. I'm sorry, so sorry for all this. If only I didn't pressure you, perhaps you wouldn't have lied, she said, her words irritating and infuriating me. I'm glad, Mother. I'm glad that you know you played a huge role in all this, I spoke bitterly, watching my mother shake her head. If only you hadn't pressured me, then maybe I wouldn't have resorted to such a silly act, I spoke bitterly and walked away. With a heavy heart, I left the mansion, entered the car, and Jackson drove off. I closed my eyes and rested my head on the headrest while memories of Nora flooded my mind. Her memories tormented me, and I wished I could turn back time, but unfortunately, I can't. The car stopped, and my eyes opened. I looked out and realized we had arrived at the Sears house. Wait here, I told Jackson as I got out of the car. As I approached the door, it opened, and the pack-seer, a woman in her early 40s, stood before me, lowering her head in respect. Greetings, she greeted and stepped aside for me to enter before closing the door. I took a seat on the couch while she sat across from me. Do you need water or anything else? She asked, but I shook my head. Let's get straight to the point, I said, and she nodded. I saw her close her eyes for a moment before opening them and holding my gaze. The rogue who attacked you was sent by one of the enemies you acquired 2 years ago in London while helping Alpha Timothy, she explained while I groaned. His name is Beta Endurance, she announced, while I nodded and stood to my feet, ready to leave. But her next words stopped me. Alpha, you're not well. The poison is dangerous, and it's still in your system. You need to get rid of it, she explained, and I sighed. I wanted to leave, but I noticed a look on her face that I couldn't ignore. What's wrong? What did you see? I questioned, and she remained silent. Speak. You swore an oath to tell me everything you see, I demanded, and she sighed, keeping quiet for a moment before speaking. I see you in a pool of your blood, gasping for air. You need to be careful, she pleaded, and I gulped and nodded. Thanks. I'll take my leave now, I told her and made my way out of the house. Standing outside, I took a deep breath and closed my eyes briefly before walking back to the car. When I settled in, I checked the time on my wristwatch and realized I was already running late for my meeting with Nora and Madison. Where to, Alpha? Jackson asked, and I showed him the location on my phone. I know the place, he nodded and started the car while I relaxed back on the seat, unbuttoning a button on my jacket. You're worried, calm down, Ethan told me, but I wouldn't listen. Everything in my life is crumbling at my feet, and I can't do anything about it. For 2 years, I've been wanting to get Nora back, but as if the moon goddess would punish me, she made Nora Madison's mate. How can I keep up with that? What on earth would make her choose me over Madison? Nothing, absolutely nothing. Don't lose hope yet, the goddess has her ways, Ethan assured me, but I scoffed and shook my head. The goddess is angry at me, Ethan. I can feel it. I murmured and pondered in thoughts until the car came to a halt in front of the cafe. I'll be back, I told Jackson, and got out of the car. As I walked into the cafe, the delicious aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted toward my nose. I raised my head to look for where they were seated and caught sight of them. Nora was seated at a table, laughing and chatting with Madison. They looked at ease with each other, and I could sense that they were smitten. Nora's dimples deepened as she laughed at something Madison said. It stabbed me in the heart seeing her smile at him in a way she has never smiled at me. I thought I had a chance to have her, but I guess I was wrong. The way she looked at him was different, there was a level of intimacy that I've never seen before, much less with me. It tore through me, shredding any hope I had of getting back together with her. Unable to control my emotions, I quickly turned around to leave. I could feel my heart rate increasing to match the panic in my chest. Tears threatened to spark in my eyes, and I couldn't stop them. As soon as I reached the door, I pulled it open and walked out fast. I reminded myself to take deep breaths, but it was easier said than done. My heart was wounded, and the pain was unbearable. I hurried into my car and closed my eyes, taking a deep breath and stopping myself from breaking down. "Are you okay, Alpha?" Jackson asked, but I didn't give a response. Instead, I tried to control my panting breath, and after a while, I was able to pull myself together. "Should I take you back to the mansion?" Jackson asked, and I remained quiet for a moment before getting out of the car. I walked back into the cafe and made my way to them. As I approached them, Nora was the first to notice me because she was facing my way. We held each other's gaze and did not look away until I got to the table, pulled out a seat, and sat before her. An uncomfortable silence filled the place as none of us said a word until I spoke. "I'm sorry for being late," I said, and Nora didn't say a word but kept holding my gaze. "Are you okay?" she asked, and I didn't give an answer. "Alpha, I have a meeting in the next few minutes," I lied while checking my watch. "Can we get down to this?" I said and relaxed in the seat. Madison looked my way and held my gaze for a moment but looked away. Nora also did the same and looked away. I said I would be giving ratings every Monday after spending the weekend with either of you, so today I'm rating Lord Madison, she announced, and we both remained silent. I watched her take out a notepad and a pen from her bag and stared at Madison, a smile creeping onto her face. "The rating is over 100, she explained, and Madison nodded. "I will be rating Lord Madison with a score of 98%, she announced, and I gulped in pain. What was I expecting? "I believe Lord Madison knows why I took out 2%, she said, and Lord Madison nodded. 98%. I scoffed and got the attention of Nora. "Alpha," she tried speaking, but I cut in. "Let's end this, Nora. Let's stop this silly game," I said while getting up on my feet. "You hate me, Nora. You hate me, and there is nothing I will do that will make me score higher than Madison," I spoke bitterly, struggling to control my emotions. "When I walked in here, I saw you two chatting and laughing like lovebirds, and as if that wasn't enough, you rated him 98% just on the first weekend. So tell me, Nora, what are you going to rate me if we spend the weekend together?" I asked, and she remained quiet. With a deep breath, I closed my eyes for a second, gathering myself for what I was going to say next. "Nora," I called. "You are already in love with Madison. I can see it in your eyes, and there is no need denying it, but I don't blame you for it. It's my fault, I made a mistake, and I'm paying for it." "What are you saying, Alpha Leo?" "I'm not in love with anyone," she defended herself. "This is a fair contest, and if I spend the weekend with you and you do better than Lord Madison, I'll score you higher," she explained with guilt, but I shook my head in disbelief. "No, Nora, there is nothing I would do that would make you like me. Nora, you hate me, and I don't blame you for it." I held Madison's gaze for a moment before walking away. As I walked away, I felt my breath becoming unsteady and my sight blurred. It felt like I was about to pass out, so I rushed out of the cafe, got into the car, and slumped on the seat. "Alpha, are you okay?" I heard the faint voice of Jackson, but I couldn't give a response. Alpha Leo's POV. I struggled to regain full consciousness as I heard familiar voices surrounding me, including one unexpected voice. With a great effort, I forced my eyes open and took in the sight of the people in the room, including Nora. Relief washed over my mother as she sat beside me on the bed. I slowly sat up, scanning the room and meeting the worried gazes of those present: my mother, Jason, the healer, and Nora. Jason seemed to read my thoughts as he spoke up, informing me that I had fainted in the car. A heavy sigh escaped my lips as I closed my eyes and reopened them, finding myself locking eyes with Nora. "Mine!" Ethan howled, causing my heart to throb with pain. Unable to bear her gaze, I looked away and turned to the healer. "What is wrong with me?" I inquired, and he paused for a moment before responding. "It's the poison in your system, and it seems like your wolf is also experiencing emotional pain," he explained. I sighed and closed my eyes briefly before opening them again. "Thank you. You all can leave now," I said, hoping they would heed my request. But my mother looked at me with a pitiful expression that I despised so much. "Please, just leave," I insisted when I realized none of them were making an effort to comply. "He wants to be left alone," Jason relayed to my mother, who nodded and stood up, leaving the room along with the others, except for Nora, who remained where she stood. I held her gaze for a moment before releasing a heavy sigh. "Why are you here?" I asked, and she quickly responded, "Today is Monday, which means I'm supposed to spend a few hours with you." I scoffed at her words and slowly got off the bed. I walked up to her and stopped a few steps away. "What games are you playing, Nora?" I asked, my voice laced with jealousy. "Stop all of this and go to Madison. You love him, so there's no need for this," I urged, ignoring the pain in my heart. I watched Nora remain silent for a moment before taking a step closer to me. "How does it feel, Alpha Leo?" she asked, her voice filled with pain and anger. "How does it feel to see your mate with another?" I couldn't find a response, so I ruffled my hair and turned my back to her. "You've caused me a lot of pain, Alpha Leo, but I'm not out for revenge. If I wanted to pay you back, I could have easily chosen Lord Madison," she spoke, while I remained silent. "I have forgiven you, Alpha Leo. I hold no grudges against you, and I hope you can forgive yourself too because you need healing." With my back turned to her, I pondered in thoughts and realized she was right. I need to forgive myself before I can receive forgiveness from her. "So, you said something back in the cafe, that you're leaving the contest. Is that correct?" she asked, waiting for a response, while I gulped and turned to face her. "Are you giving me up for Lord Madison?" she questioned, and I quickly shook my head and stepped closer to her. All I did and said was out of impulse. I would never give up on her. I reached out and gently took her hand in mine, feeling the warmth and softness of her touch. "Nora, I don't know how to begin making amends for the pain I've caused you," I confessed, my voice filled with a mix of sincerity and vulnerability. "But I want to try. I want to make things right, not just for myself but for us. Will you give me that chance?" Nora's eyes softened, and she squeezed my hand gently. "Alpha Leo, we all make mistakes. What matters is how we choose to learn from them and grow. I believe there is goodness in you, and there are also a lot of things about you that I don't know, and I want to know them and experience them all," she said and flashed me a big smile, causing my heart to swell with joy. Nora's POV: I stood outside Dora's apartment, waiting for Lord Madison, who was supposed to take me out to dinner. Just as I was about to make a mind link with him, I noticed his car pulled up. With a smile, I walked up to his car and saw him approaching me. "I'm sorry for coming late," he apologized, and I nodded before he sealed his lips with mine and pulled away. I watched him cast a lustful glance at me before holding my gaze. "You look beautiful," he praised, and I blushed and began walking away while he hurried up and opened the car for me. I got in while he sat in the driver's seat and started the car. A few minutes into the drive, I caught Lord Madison stealing glances at me, that I couldn't help but smile shyly. "So, how was your meeting with Leo yesterday?" he asked, and I quickly gave a response. "It was fine, but I left early because he needed to rest," I explained, and Lord Madison nodded. The drive to the restaurant was lively as I sang along with the music playing on the music player while Lord Madison hummed to it until the car came to a halt in front of a famous five-star restaurant. "We are here," Lord Madison announced as he turned off the engine and got out of the car. He walked to my side of the door, opened it, and I stepped out with a smile. "This place is beautiful," I said as I looked around while Lord Madison took my hand and led me inside the restaurant. "Greetings, sir. Your table is over there." We followed the waiter to our table, and Lord Madison pulled out the chair for me to sit while I thanked him with a grateful smile. As we settled down, Lord Madison leaned closer, his voice filled with warmth. "I'm so glad you like it here, Nora. I wanted tonight to be special." His words sent a flutter through my heart, and I couldn't help but blush again. "Me too," I replied, trying to sound composed despite the butterflies in my stomach. Lord Madison's constant presence in my life for the past few days has built a connection that has grown deeper with each passing day. We ordered our drinks and perused the menu, engaging in light conversation. Lord Madison shared stories about his travels and town, and I listened intently, captivated by his words. He had a way of making even the simplest things sound fascinating. As we waited for our food to arrive, Lord Madison reached across the table, gently grasping my hand. His touch sent a jolt of electricity through me, and I felt an instant connection. His eyes met mine, filled with genuine affection. "Nora, I feel incredibly lucky to have you in my life," he confessed softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You bring light and joy into my world, and I can't imagine my days without you." His words touched my heart, and I couldn't hide the smile that spread across my face. "Lord Madison, you've brought so much happiness into my life as well," I replied, my voice filled with sincerity. "I wonder how my life would be then and now if you didn't show up." I spoke truthfully, and he smiled. Our conversation continued, and laughter filled the air as we shared stories and discovered common interests. As the night drew to a close, Lord Madison paid the bill, and we made our way back to the car. The drive back was quieter, the air filled with a comfortable silence. I leaned my head against the window, feeling contentedness settle within me. But then I felt Lord Madison's hands on my exposed thighs. He gently moved his hands from my thighs and made his way down to the hem of my gown and made his way to my bare skin. A gasp escaped my lips. "What are you doing, Lord Madison?" I moaned with closed eyes, but he didn't give a response, and just when I thought he would go further he pulled his hand away and stopped the car. With a deep breath, I opened my eyes, held his gaze and saw a devilish smirk on his face as he leaned to my left ear. "I want you to think of me tonight," he whispered, his breath fanning my neck, causing my legs to feel weak. I watched him as he got out of the car, walked to my side of the door, and opened it for me. Lord Madison escorted me to the front door, pulling me into a warm embrace, and I melted into his arms, inhaling his intoxicating scent of mints. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," I whispered, my voice filled with genuine gratitude. Lord Madison smiled, his eyes filled with tenderness. "The pleasure was all mine, Nora. I cherish every moment spent with you." He leaned in and kissed me gently before pulling away. I stood at the door and watched him drive off before entering the house, where I found Dora in the sitting room, watching a movie. "Look who's back," she teased, while I smiled and sat beside her. "So, how was it?" Dora asked, and I smiled, giving her the answer she wanted. "You're a lucky girl, Nora. Being mated to such prominent men is a gift," she praised, but I scoffed before saying, "It's more like a curse, Dora." I grumbled and began taking off my shoes. Dora paused the movie and turned to me with a questioning gaze. "What's the problem?" she asked, and I couldn't give an answer. "Based on what you've told me, it appears that you like Lord Madison and you are going to choose him, so what's the problem?" she asked, and again, I couldn't give an answer. "Or is there something you're not telling me?" she questioned, and I heaved a deep sigh before holding her gaze. "Yes, it's true that I like Lord Madison. I like the way he makes me feel, especially his touch, but," I gulped and hesitated for a moment before continuing, "but my thoughts drift to Alpha Leo from time to time, no matter how hard I try not to." "Nora's POV, how do I look?" I asked Dora as I turned around for her to take a better look at me. "You look stunning. I bet Alpha Leo won't be able to take his eyes off you," she praised while I blushed and tucked my hair behind my ears. "We are going for lunch," I said, and Dora nodded. "Have fun," she told me, and I smiled before leaving the apartment. As I stepped out of the apartment, I saw Alpha Leo standing by his car, dressed in a pair of black jeans and a black button-up t-shirt. His hands were tucked in his pockets, and his gaze was on me. "Mine," Lolita howled in my head, sending a different type of feeling to envelop me. As I approached him, we didn't break our gaze, rather, I held his gaze until I reached the car. "Alpha Leo," I greeted. "You look beautiful," he commended and tried to get closer to me, maybe to give me a kiss, but he stopped and smiled instead. "Shall we?" he asked, and I nodded, feeling strange, wondering why he was holding back. He opened the door for me, and I got in before he got into the car. As I put on my seatbelt, I watched him start the car, but he didn't move. Instead, a frown appeared on his face. He was oddly quiet and lost in thought. "Are you okay?" I asked, and he sighed and nodded. I saw him frown again, and this time he groaned before holding my gaze. "I'm sorry, but there is a little problem," he announced. "What's wrong?" I asked, and he sighed and ran his fingers through his hair before responding. "I have to be somewhere, and I totally forgot. Today is the graduation ceremony of the Protectors, and I totally forgot," he groaned and relaxed his head on the headrest of the car. Just by looking at him, I knew he was angry at the turn of events. "Protectors? What are Protectors?" I asked because I haven't heard of such names. "We refer to them as the Alpha Third Eyes. They undergo several types of training for 5 years, and after they graduate, they join the Pack Warriors, but not just as ordinary warriors. They are the men who stand on the front lines of war with me," he explained while I listened attentively. "Their training is so different from other warriors. These Protectors are trained in water, in air, and on land. They only get to see their families once every year during the period of 5 years, which is their training period," he explained, and I frowned. "Isn't that unfair to them?" I said, and Alpha Leo scoffed. "They are lucky. My training took me 7 years, and I didn't see my father or mother. We only talked on phones or through Mind Link," he announced while I held his gaze, but he looked away. We both remained silent until I spoke, breaking the silence. "So they are graduating today after undergoing training for 5 years, I asked, and Alpha Leo hummed. "Is it a secret parade?" Because I haven't really heard of such a parade, I asked. The parade is held once every 5 years, and it's not an open ceremony. The protectors graduating are only allowed to bring 2 family members to see them graduate, and apart from them, it's only I and Jason that will be present, he explained, and I nodded and took off my seat belt. It's all right, maybe we can have the meal as dinner, I suggested, but he shook his head and held my gaze. Do you want to come with me? He asked, and I furrowed my eyebrows. I can come with you to the passing out parade. I asked, and he nodded. It will be fun, he urged me, and I smiled. Really, there won't be any problem? I asked worriedly, but he scoffed and shook his head. They won't be any problem when you are with me. So, will you join me? He asked, and I nodded excitedly. Then let's go, he said, starting up the car while I put on my seatbelt, and the car drove off. A comfortable silence filled the car until I spoke. Is this your first time inaugurating them? I asked, but he shook his head. This is my second time inaugurating them. I became an alpha when I was just 20 because of my father's illness, he explained, and I nodded, noticing the sad look on his face when he mentioned his father. Although I didn't grow up in the pack, my father made sure I attended every passing out parade with him, he said, and I stared at him, wishing I could know more about him. There were so many things about him that I didn't really know. The drive remained silent until the car drove through a black gate. As he drove in, I realized it was a large field. The field was filled with a few people, but they all seemed to be members of the pack. There was an air of excitement and anticipation surrounding the place. Alpha Leo parked the car in a designated area, and we stepped out together. He took my hand in his, and we walked towards a small group of people. As we made our way through the mist of people, I couldn't help but notice the proud and happy faces of the families present. They were eagerly waiting to see their loved ones graduate and become protectors. I felt a mix of curiosity and awe. This was a part of the werewolf world I hadn't been exposed to before. Alpha Leo led me to a seat, and I noticed everyone bowing their heads to him while he nodded and led me to a reserved section where only Beta Jason was seated. Beta Jason smiled warmly at me as we approached, which was indeed odd. I had met Beta Jason a few times, and he always had this expressionless look on his face, but this time he was actually smiling at me. You made it, Beta Jason spoke, and Alpha Leo nodded. Greetings, Beta Jason, I greeted. Greetings, Nora, he responded with a smile. I smiled back, feeling a little nervous but also grateful for the warm welcome. We took our seats. I was seated at Alpha Leo's left hand, while Beta Jason sat at his right-hand side. The families of the protectors took their seats, and with my eyes, I counted the protectors and realized there were 10 of them. Are they only 10? I asked Alpha Leo, who nodded. Yes, we chose only 10 men after they went through a lot of screening, he explained, and I nodded, excited to see what would happen. As the ceremony began, I found myself captivated by the proceedings. The protectors to be showcased their skills and abilities, demonstrating their training in water, air, and land. It was an impressive display of strength, agility, and teamwork. As the protectors continued their impressive display of skills, I couldn't help but notice a change in the atmosphere. The families were growing more excited, and whispers started spreading through the crowd. Suddenly, the protectors began removing their shirts one by one, revealing their well-toned bodies underneath. Curiosity burned within me, and I turned to Alpha Leo, my eyes filled with questions. Why are they taking off their clothes? I asked him, unable to contain my curiosity any longer. Alpha Leo looked at me with a mix of amusement and pride in his eyes. It's time for the final challenge, he explained, his voice carrying a hint of excitement. They will now face me in combat, and whoever can withstand me the longest will be recognized as the best graduating student, he explained while I widened my eyes. You are going to fight them? I asked, and he scoffed, I wouldn't put it that way. I'm just going to have a little fun with them, and besides, I'm not using my ability, just physical strength, he explained with a smirk. Boastful, I murmured, and he scoffed with a smile. But then I went on to ask, what if any of them defeats you? I asked, and he smiled and leaned closer to me, his intense gaze holding mine. Have you seen me fight before? He asked while I shook my head. That's why you could think of such, he said and tucked my hair behind my ears, slightly touching the back of my ears, causing my legs to weaken. It's strange how just a slight touch from him could have such an effect on me. He sat back in his seat while I gulped and stared at the soon-to-be protectors. By looking at them, I could tell they were well-built, able men, and it still surprised me that none of these 10 men could defeat Alpha Leo. Alpha Leo, I called his attention back to me. I want to place a bet, I said, and Alpha Leo raised his eyebrows. You're so confident that you would defeat all these men, but what if any of them defeats you? I asked and saw a smile appear on his face. You intend to bet that one of the men will defeat me? He asked, and I nodded. If you defeat them all, then I'll grant any request you ask. But if any of the men defeats you, then you'll grant my request, I challenged while holding his gaze. I knew what I was doing was ridiculous. Alpha Leo is known for his gift of strength. Alpha Leo's lips curved into a smirk as he considered my proposal. His eyes sparkled with excitement. You're quite confident, Nora. Very well, I accept your challenge. But, Alpha Leo continued, his voice low and filled with playful confidence, since I have full faith in my abilities, I'll declare you the winner if any of the men can withstand me for an entire 2 minutes. How does that sound? His challenge surprised me, but I couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. This bet was turning into something more than just a challenge. It was a chance to see him fight and maybe even uncover a hidden side of Alpha Leo. Deal, I agreed, extending my hand towards him. He took it firmly, his touch sending a shiver down my spine. Nora's POV I watched as he smirked and began unbuttoning his shirt. With a gulp, I stared at his well-muscled body and couldn't help but drool. After taking off his shirt, he took off his shoes and turned to hold my gaze for a second before smiling widely at me and leaving. As Alpha Leo stood there, shirtless and confident, a hush fell over the crowd. The protectors, who had finished their display, turned their attention towards Alpha Leo, ready to face the ultimate challenge and win the prize. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation and excitement. I couldn't tear my eyes away from Alpha Leo's chiseled physique and the air of power that surrounded him. It was clear why he was considered the strongest alpha. I had no doubt that he would emerge victorious in this bet, but then why did I make a bet? Alpha Leo took a step forward, his gaze focused on the first protector. The young man, who had trained for 5 long years to reach this point, stood tall, his expression a mixture of determination and respect. The crowd held their breath as the two faced each other, ready to begin the combat. With lightning-fast movements, Alpha Leo engaged the young man in a battle of strength and skill. His punches were precise and powerful, each one landing with a resounding impact. It was a display of pure dominance, as if Alpha Leo was a force of nature, unstoppable and unyielding. Within 7 seconds, the man fell to the ground, grunting with pain, and a healer rushed to attend to him. The next protector fought valiantly, using every ounce of his training to defend himself. But Alpha Leo was on a different level altogether. His movements were fluid and calculated, his strikes hitting their mark with deadly accuracy. Within 20 seconds, the man fell to the ground. Impressive, I murmured to myself, staring at him with admiration. Just by looking at him, I noticed he was just having fun as he had spoken. This seemed like an easy task for him, and I wondered what it would look like to see him in a real fight, using his abilities. One by one, Alpha Leo faced each protector, dispatching them with ease. His movements were a blur, his punches and kicks landing with precision. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause, witnessing the true might of Alpha Leo. As the final protector fell to the ground, defeated and exhausted, Alpha Leo stood tall, his chest heaving with exertion. The crowd roared with excitement, their admiration for their Alpha reaching new heights. But all I could focus on was the victorious smile that graced Alpha Leo's lips. He turned towards me, his eyes shining with triumph. We held each other's gaze as he made his way to me while Beta Jason announced the best graduating protector, who stood up to Alpha Leo for 56 seconds. He reached where I was sitting and sat on his seat before looking my way. "Well, Nora, it seems I've won the bet," he said, his voice filled with satisfaction. "What is my prize?" I scoffed and playfully rolled my eyes at him before speaking. "You can make a wish," I grumbled. His smile widened, and he leaned closer, his presence sending a thrill down my spine. "I will think about it," he smirked and sat back in his seat. With a gulp, I fixed my gaze on the ceremony, making sure to avoid his gaze until the inauguration was over. After the ceremony, he went over to have a talk with the protector. With a smile, I watched him calmly speaking with them, but a tap on my shoulder made me turn my gaze and realize it was an elderly woman who appeared to be in her late 50s. "Hi, can I help you with something?" I asked, and she smiled before leaning toward my left ear. "Be careful, or you might lose them both," she whispered, and her words sent cold shivers down my spine. She moved away from my ear, and before I could ask her what she meant, she began walking away. Confused and startled, I watched her walk away, wondering who she could be. "Probably a witch or a seer," Lolita suggested, and I agreed with her. But her words got me worried. "Lose them both." Her words got me panicked, and I went into deep thoughts, wondering what would happen. "Are you okay?" Alpha Leo's words snapped me out of my thoughts, and I didn't realize when he walked up to me. "Are you okay?" he asked worriedly, and I nodded before getting to my feet. "Can I go back home?" "I'm not feeling well," I said, and he stared at me for a second before nodding. "Let's go," he said and led the way. We both got into the car, and I rested my head on the window while the woman's words kept buzzing in my mind. "What happened?" Alpha Leo asked after a moment of silence, but I didn't respond. "Did someone say or do something to you?" he asked, and I still didn't respond. "Did I do something wrong? Please just tell me." His words got me irritated, and I snapped, "Can you just let me be?" I blurted. He didn't say a word, and I felt guilty. It wasn't right to speak to him in such a manner. Besides being my mate, he was also my alpha. With a heavy sigh, I closed my eyes, cursing myself for taking out my worries and frustration on him. After a while, the car stopped in front of Dora's apartment, and before I could say a word, he came out of the car, got to my side, and opened the door. I got out of the car and stood before him with guilt. "I'm sorry," he didn't let me finish my words when he suddenly pulled me into a hug. My heart raced as Alpha Leo embraced me, his strong arms providing a sense of comfort and security. I melted into his touch, feeling my tension and worries slowly fade away. Out of impulse, I wrapped my arms around him, burying my face in his chest, taking in his familiar intoxicating scent. "I'm sorry too," he whispered, his voice filled with sincerity. "I didn't mean to push you. I care about you, Nora. I want to understand and be there for you." My eyes filled with tears as I realized how much he had changed. He was not just Alpha Leo, but now he is someone who genuinely cares for my well-being. I pulled away slightly, looking up into his eyes. "Why weren't you this way when we first met?" I said, my voice filled with emotion. "This would have been much easier." Alpha Leo's expression changed to that of regret, and he cupped my face in his hands, wiping away stray tears with his thumb. "I'm sorry for putting you in this mess and making things hard for you, but I'm certain of one thing." He paused and took a deep breath before he continued, "Whoever you choose will truly love you." He spoke while still holding my gaze. "I love you, Nora. I don't know when it happened, maybe when I followed you to that orphanage, or perhaps when I saw you at that racing competition, or even when I saw you with Madison. But one thing is certain, I got to know you and fell for you." His words caught me off guard, and my heart swelled with a mixture of emotions. Alpha Leo had always been confident and seemingly invincible, but now he was laying his vulnerabilities bare in front of me. It was a side of him I hadn't seen before, and it made me realize how much he had changed. "But I also can't deny the fact that Madison loves you. I see the way he looks at you, and he has only looked at one lady that way, and that was his late wife." His words dumbfounded me. I didn't expect him to speak highly of Madison. "Madison loves you, Nora. That's why I'm certain that whoever you choose will love you dearly, so don't get worked up thinking about making the wrong decision," he said, still holding my gaze. We stared into each other's eyes for a moment, and as I watched him lean in to give me a kiss, I closed my eyes, waiting for his lips to touch mine. Instead, I felt a kiss on my forehead. Confused, I opened my eyes and saw him flash me a weak smile before removing his hands from my cheeks. I had questions, and I wanted to ask him why he was holding back, but I held back my words because I didn't want to seem desperate. "Go inside and rest. I'll see you on Friday." He smiled weakly and walked over to the driver's side of the car, while I watched him get in and drive away. As I made my way back inside, my thoughts were consumed by the choices ahead. It wasn't an easy decision to make, and the elderly woman's cryptic warning still echoed in my mind. What did she mean by losing them both? I couldn't shake off the feeling of impending danger, as if a storm was brewing around me. Lord Madison's POV, I couldn't tear my eyes away from her as she delicately licked the ice cream. She was so engrossed in it that she didn't even notice my intense gaze. "I wish I was the ice cream," I playfully teased, causing her to blush as she slowly looked up, meeting my eyes. "Well, you taste better than the ice cream," she flirted back, a smirk appearing on my face. "So I taste better than the ice cream?" I asked, seeking confirmation, and she blushed again, diverting her attention back to her treat. With my arms folded, I observed her as she savored each lick, a playful expression on her face. In moments like these, I found myself completely captivated by her. Her simple actions, like enjoying an ice cream cone, emitted an effortless charm that drew me in. As she continued to enjoy her treat, a surge of affection washed over me. The way she blushed at my playful comment only added to her allure. I yearned to know more about her. "Stop staring," she grumbled, looking up at me, breaking my reverie. "I'll miss you," I grumbled back, knowing that tomorrow was Friday and she would be spending the weekend with Leo. That meant I couldn't even talk to her during that time. "I'll miss you too, but it's just for 3 days," she reassured me, but I couldn't help but frown and lean in closer. Is he going to touch you? I found myself asking, the tinge of jealousy evident in my voice. Confusion flickered across her face. Are you going to let him touch you? I continued, voicing my insecurities. She rolled her eyes, exasperated, and sighed, we shouldn't be discussing such topics. I released a heavy sigh and sank back into my seat. I will be traveling to my town tomorrow morning but will be back on Monday morning, I announced, noticing the curious look on her face. Is everything okay back home? She asked, concern etched on her face. Yes, it's just that I need to put some things in order, I explained, and she nodded. We both remained silent for a while until she decided to speak up. This contest is really taking a toll on me, she murmured, and I moved closer, reaching out to hold her hands on the table. You know you don't have to go through all this, I said softly, gently squeezing her hands. All you have to do is choose me, Nora. Pick me, and I promise you won't regret it. I pleaded, locking my gaze with hers. What about Alpha Leo? She asked, confusion clouding her eyes. I sighed, feeling the frustration rise within me. He will probably get past it, and maybe, if he's lucky, he will get a second chance mate. But we're not talking about Leo here, Nora. What I'm saying is, choose me right now. Come back with me to my kingdom. We'll get married, and I'll make you my queen. A better life awaits us, I pleaded desperately, but she shook her head. I have already declared a contest, the contest. I blurted out, unable to contain my frustration. Don't tell me you're even considering giving Leo a chance or accepting him, I snapped. Have you forgotten so soon? He rejected you and even had a child with your sister, I reminded her, my voice laced with anger. She remained silent, unable to respond. Frustrated, I ran my hand through my hair and held her gaze. Do you know how I'm feeling, knowing that you are going to be with another man? Do you know how tormented I feel, knowing that another man would touch you? I snapped. Still, she remained silent. Tell me, how would you feel if you see me with another woman? How would you feel, knowing that I'm going to touch another woman? I asked in frustration and saw tears well up in her eyes. What are you doing? My wolf cautioned. With a deep sigh, I took a deep breath and calmed my emotions. Taking a moment to compose myself, I realized that my outburst had only intensified the tension between us. It was clear that my words had affected her deeply, and I regretted letting my frustration get the better of me. I'm sorry, I said, my voice softer this time. I didn't mean to snap at you like that. I'm struggling with the thought of you being with someone else. She remained silent, her teary eyes reflecting the hurt my words had caused. I reached out to take her hand, but she pulled away and stood to her feet. Goodbye, Lord Madison. She didn't let those words finish from her lips before she began walking away. Nora! I called and hurriedly got on my feet. I followed her out of the restaurant and met up with her just outside the restaurant. Please hold on. I pleaded and grabbed her wrist, causing her to halt her step and turn to me. I'm sorry, no, you are not, she cut off with anger. You are here saying all these things to me, but have you bothered to sit and think about what I might be going through? She asked. Do you think this is easy for me? She asked, this is not just about a relationship, but it's a bond. I am mated to you and also to him. Do you think it will be easy to just pick anyone? She questioned, and I couldn't give a response. Every night, I can't sleep without thinking of what to do, whom to choose, will I make the right decision, what about the person I won't be with? Can he be able to endure it? I kept thinking about it, and here you are passing judgment at me like it's easy. She spoke in anger and pain, causing guilt to fill my being. As I listened to her words, a wave of guilt washed over me. She was right. I had been selfish in my approach, only considering my own desires and not fully comprehending the internal struggles she was facing. I released her wrist and took a step back, giving her the space she needed. I didn't realize how difficult this must be for you, I admitted, my voice laced with remorse. I shouldn't have lashed out like that without considering your feelings. She looked at me with a mix of anger, hurt, and vulnerability. Her emotions were raw, and I could see the weight of her decision weighing heavily on her shoulders. I wanted to support her, to be there for her in this challenging time. I know it's not an easy decision, Nora, I said softly, my tone filled with sincerity. And I'm sorry for putting you in such a difficult position. Whatever choice you make, I want you to know that I'll be here for you. I care about you deeply, and I want what's best for you, even if it's not with me. Her gaze softened slightly as she took in my words. The tension between us began to ease, and I could sense a glimmer of understanding. I appreciate your apology, she replied, her voice tinged with sadness. But this contest means a lot to me. It's not just about choosing a partner, it's about finding myself and making a decision that will shape my future. I need time to figure things out. I nodded, respecting her need for space and reflection. Take all the time you need, Nora. Just know that I'll be here, patiently waiting, no matter the outcome. You deserve happiness, and I hope you find it, whether it's with me or someone else. She gave me a smile, took a step closer to me, and gave me a hug while resting her head on my chest. As she embraced me, I held her tightly, cherishing the warmth of her presence. It was a bittersweet feeling, knowing that our future together was uncertain. We stayed in each other's arms for a while before she slowly pulled away and held my gaze. Let me take you home, I suggested, but she shook her head with a weak smile. I want to take a walk. Can you come with me? She asked, and I nodded. We walked together in silence for a while, the weight of our unspoken emotions hanging heavily in the air. The streets were quiet, and the night was freezing. As we reached a park, she suggested we sit on a bench while looking at a small pond. We sat side by side, the silence between us both comforting and agonizing. I wanted to reach out and hold her hand, to offer her comfort, but I resisted the urge, respecting her space. After a while, she spoke softly, breaking the silence. I never expected to find myself in this situation, torn between two people I care about deeply. It's a difficult choice to make, and I fear that no matter what I decide, someone will end up hurt. Her voice quivered with emotion, and I placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Nora, whatever decision you make, it will be the right one for you. Your happiness and well-being matter the most. Trust yourself and your instincts. Tears welled up in her eyes again, and she turned to face me. But what if my instincts are clouded by my emotions? What if I make the wrong choice and regret it later? Nora's POV. Lord Madison stopped in front of Dora's apartment and gave me a kiss before I got out of the car. Without looking back, I made my way inside the house and met Dora in the sitting room. You're back, she said, moving her attention away from the book in her hands and settling them on me. You don't look okay. Do you want to talk about it? She asked, and I nodded before taking a seat beside her. What happened? She asked, and I remained silent for a while before speaking. I'm exhausted. It's all so tiring, I grumbled, and she gave me a pitiful look before moving closer and placing a hand on my shoulder. Take it easy on yourself so you won't break down, she pleaded, and I sighed before getting up on my feet. I'm going to bed. Aren't you coming? I asked, and she shook her head before responding. I'll stay up for a while, she said, and I nodded before leaving. I reached the room, freshened up, and got dressed in my nightwear before laying on the bed to catch some sleep. But Maxwell's voice in my head caught my attention. Nora, how are you doing? He asked, and I responded with a heavy sigh. I'm already getting tired, Maxwell. I want to run away, I grumbled, and Maxwell scoffed before saying, and where do you think you would go? He asked while I grumbled. No matter where you go, they will surely find you, Nora. You can't run away from this. You have to face it, he advised, and all I could do was groan and leave the bed. Nora, I know this is really stressing you, and you are scared and worried about making the wrong decisions, but you don't have to let that bother you. Just take one step at a time, he advised while I heaved a deep breath and sat behind the desk. I wish things were not this way, I murmured. Everything will be fine. Just go to bed. I'll talk to you tomorrow, he said and ended the mind link. My thoughts were filled with worries, and I knew I couldn't sleep. So I switched on my laptop and began writing, hoping that it would take my worries away. The next day, the room door opened, and Dora walked in. Beta Jason is here for you, Dora announced, causing me to furrow my eyebrows. Beta Jason? I asked, confused because I was expecting Alpha Leo to pick me up, not his beta. Thank you. I'll be there in a minute, I told Dora, who nodded and left. I was confused about why Beta Jason would be here instead of Alpha Leo. But then I thought that an important meeting might have come up. I picked up my small suitcase and left the room. I reached the sitting room and saw him seated on the couch. Greetings, I greeted, and he nodded with a weak smile, which made me realize something was wrong. Where is Alpha Leo? Why are you the one here to pick me? I asked, and saw him go silent for a moment before speaking. An urgent call came up a moment ago, but he will be back before nightfall, he said, and I frowned but didn't say a word. Can we leave? He asked, and I nodded and said goodbye to Dora before leaving. We both got into the car, and he drove off. But as he drove on, I became curious and couldn't hold back anymore. What is the important call for? I asked, fixing my gaze on him. I watched him remain silent, contemplating whether he should speak or not. After a moment of silence, he spoke up. There is a conflict between the werewolves and the vampire clans over a piece of land, and Alpha Leo was among the alphas called to attend the meeting between the werewolves and vampires, he said, and I frowned, realizing how dangerous the meeting was. Why must he be called? Why didn't they choose someone else? I grumbled, and Beta Jason responded. That's because if the meeting doesn't go well, then a fight might emerge there, and you know what that means, he explained, causing fear to run down my spine. So, are you trying to say there is a possibility of them fighting? I asked, and he nodded. I spoke in panic. No need to worry. He will be fine. He is already used to things like this, so he'll handle it well, Beta Jason tried assuring me, but it wasn't working. I was scared, worried that something might happen to him. He will be fine, and besides, if anything happens to him, we are going to feel it, Lolita assured me, causing a heavy sigh to leave my lips. I sat back in my seat with worry. I wanted to make a mind link with him, but I stopped myself. Beta Jason drove into the mansion, and we both got out. A maid offered to take my suitcase, but I refused. Beta Jason and I entered the sitting room and met Lady Christabel there. The moment our gazes met, she flashed me a welcoming smile while I walked up to her. "Nora, it's nice to see you again," she smiled, and I smiled back, remembering the nice moments I had with her. "Greetings, Lady Christabel," I greeted and took the seat she gestured for me to take. "Alpha Leo demands that I make you comfortable in his absence," she said, and I nodded. "Thanks." She stared at me for a moment before saying, "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, and I didn't give a response. "We were close. You could have told me what was going on. I would have helped. All this wouldn't have resulted in this," she spoke regretfully, while I sighed before responding. "He didn't want me then, and I was scared of being rejected," I said, and she frowned and shook her head in regret. "And now he is paying for his mistakes in the most painful way," she murmured and looked my way. "I know that you are going to choose someone, and whoever you are going to choose loves you. Leo is my son, and so is Madison. I wish there was a way for none of them to be hurt, but that's just it," she sighed and went silent, while I pondered her words. She was indeed right, someone would definitely get hurt when I picked one. "My bad, Emma will show you your room, and you can come down for dinner if you want to," she said, and I nodded with a grateful smile before leaving with Lady Emma. I followed Lady Emma up the stairs until we arrived at a door, which she opened and stepped aside for me to enter. "Thank you," I said as I went in and closed the door. I walked into Alpha Leo's room and caught a whiff of his lingering scent. Looking around, I noticed that the room was cozy and well furnished, featuring a comfortable bed, a sitting area, and a desk by the window. There were modern amenities like a TV, mini fridge, and a private bathroom. I moved around and began to worry. The conflict between the werewolf and vampire clans weighed heavily on my mind. Knowing that Alpha Leo's involvement in the meeting carried the risk of violence and danger, I couldn't help but worry about his safety. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I felt a mixture of fear and anxiety. I wanted to reach out to Alpha Leo through our mind link, but I resisted the urge. I knew he needed to focus on the situation at hand, and I didn't want to distract him. To clear my head, I turned on my laptop and decided to write. Writing had always been a way for me to channel my emotions and organize my thoughts. Hoping it would provide some distraction, I immersed myself in the task. A few hours later, there was a knock on the door, and I gestured for the person to come in. The door opened, and Lady Christabel walked in. "You didn't come for dinner," she said, and I weakly smiled. "Apologies, I got carried away," I said, and she nodded. "Do you want the maids to bring it upstairs for you?" she asked, but I politely declined. "All right, I will let you rest. We will talk tomorrow," she said, turning to leave. However, she stopped and turned back to me. "You may have to go to bed. I don't think he is coming tonight," she said, and I frowned. "Did he tell you that?" I asked, and she shook her head. "According to Jason, he says the meeting is still on, so I doubt he'll drive back since it's already 10 p.m., she explained. I nodded, concealing the hurt on my face. "Good night," I said. "Good night," she responded. I decided to follow Lady Christabel's suggestion and go to bed. I changed into my nightwear and slipped into the comfortable bed, but sleep eluded me. My thoughts kept drifting back to Alpha Leo and the dangerous situation he was in. Unable to bear the silence and stillness of the room, I initiated a mind link with Beta Jason. "It's Nora," I said. "Yes, Nora," he responded. "How is the meeting? Have you heard anything from him?" I asked, and he quickly replied. If you're so worried about him, you know you could just mind link with him instead of me, he said, and I gulped. But not to worry, he is on his way back, he assured me, and a sigh of relief escaped my lips. Nora's POV. Wake up, Alpha Leo. Wake up, I pleaded as I shook his lifeless body lying in a pool of his own blood. As I knelt beside Alpha Leo's motionless form, my heart pounded in my chest, and my hands trembled. Blood pooled around him, staining the ground beneath us. Panic surged through my veins, and tears filled my eyes. Alpha Leo, please wake up, I pleaded, but he remained lifeless. Alpha Leo! I yelled, and as I opened my eyes, I realized it was just a dream. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and my whole body was soaked with profuse sweat. Alpha Leo, I spoke in fear, and just then, the door opened, and he walked in. Alpha Leo! I shouted, jumping out of bed and hurrying towards him. I gave him a tight hug, relieved to see him standing before me, alive and unhurt. Alpha Leo held me gently, his strong arms providing a sense of security and comfort. I'm here, Nora, he whispered, his voice filled with reassurance. It was just a dream. I'm okay. He spoke as if he knew I had just dreamt about him. With a relieved sigh, I clung to him, needing the physical connection to anchor myself in reality. Clutching Alpha Leo tightly, I was overwhelmed with fear and relief. The vivid nightmare of him lying lifeless haunted me. But as he stood before me, alive and unharmed, I couldn't help but cry tears of relief. His embrace provided a much-needed sense of security. I buried my face in his chest, finding comfort in his steady heartbeat. It was a reminder that he was real and here with me. What did you see? He asked as he pulled me away and cupped my face with his hands. Tell me what you saw, he pleaded, and I sighed and moved away from him. I walked back to the bed and sat on it while he stood a bit away from me, waiting for me to speak. I saw you lying lifeless in a pool of your blood. It looked so real and vivid, I murmured, watching him remain silent. He didn't say a word, but instead, he moved away from the door, walked to the fridge, and took out a bottle of water, gulping it down while I watched. By his appearance, he looked exhausted and drained, and I wondered what happened at the meeting. He turned to me and flashed me a weak smile before making his way to me. Go to sleep, it's past midnight, he said, and I frowned, wondering why he acted so reluctant about my dream. And aren't you going to bed? I asked, seeing him go silent for a moment before responding. I will join you, but I need to clear my head in the woods, he said, and I frowned, getting to my feet. You're going to the woods? I asked, and he nodded. But I will be back soon. I'm coming with you, then, I spoke stubbornly, folding my arms. I just told you that I had a dream, and you seem so reluctant about it, I spoke angrily, and saw him massage his forehead. You don't even seem bothered by it, I snapped, and he sighed and sat on the couch. I watched him go silent for a moment, as if lost in deep thought, and I was curious about what he was thinking. Don't yell at him. He's so tired and exhausted, Lolita spoke, and I sighed, realizing she was right. He looked worn out and exhausted. Without saying a word, I sat on the bed and watched him close his eyes, resting his head on the headrest of the couch. Then, I decided to speak up. You have to see your seer. This is not the first time I've had this dream, I advised, and he opened his eyes, meeting mine. His green eyes looked dull and lifeless, which worried and made me anxious. I've been having this particular dream for the past year. I met my seer, and all she told me was to be careful, he said, and I gulped. She didn't give you any details. I asked, and he shook his head, standing to his feet. Alpha Leo got up and came toward me, his tired eyes meeting mine. I could feel the heaviness he carried, the burden on his shoulders. He weakly smiled before saying, "Don't worry, I'll be fine," and placed a kiss on my forehead before going to the closet to select a towel and sweatpants, then disappearing into the bathroom. As he left, I couldn't help but ponder his words. If he had been having this dream, it meant something was definitely wrong, and danger lurked. The thought of that scared me. After a while, he emerged from the bathroom, shirtless and wearing only sweatpants. His hair dripped water as he dried it with the towel, and I couldn't help but shamefully drool over his body. "You should go to bed," he said, and I frowned. I saw him smile and drop the towel, making his way towards me. He squatted before me, holding my cheeks with both hands. "I love your cheeks. They're so soft and puffy," he said, while I rolled my eyes and shyly looked away. "I'm sorry for not picking you up, and I promise to make it up to you," he said, and I nodded. "Then let's go to bed," he said, standing up. As we settled into bed, Alpha Leo pulled me close to him, his warmth enveloping me. I nestled my head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. It brought a sense of calm, making his arms feel like the safest place in the world. "Alpha Leo," I whispered, my voice barely audible in the quiet room. "Promise me that you'll be careful. Promise me that you'll do everything in your power to stay safe," I pleaded, as the dream kept playing in my head like a movie. He tightened his hold on me, his fingers gently caressing my hair. "I promise, Nora," he replied, his voice filled with determination. "Nothing will happen to me," he assured me as I lifted my head and held his gaze. We held each other's gaze for a moment until he smiled and placed a kiss on my forehead, causing a frown to appear on my face. "Why are you restraining yourself from touching or even kissing me?" I blurted out, immediately regretting my words. Alpha Leo looked at me, his expression softening. "It's not that I don't want to touch or kiss you, Nora," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "It's just that I don't want to rush things, especially when I know I won't be able to control myself if I touch you, and who says you should control yourself?" I asked, not believing I just said that. "Damn! Did I just say that?" Alpha Leo's POV mine. Ethan's voice echoed in my head, urging me to claim her lips, but I resisted and shook my head. "I can't, it's okay, ignore what I just said," she replied and lay back on the bed. Without needing to be told, I knew my words had hurt her, but I believed it was for the best. Ever since I met her, I had been consumed by a desire to kiss her lips, to touch and feel her. But whenever I looked into her eyes, guilt washed over me, a constant reminder of the pain I had caused her in the past. Taking a deep breath, I tried to calm the storm of conflicting emotions within me. I held her close, wrapping my arms around her, feeling the warmth of her body against mine. It was a bittersweet moment, being so close to her yet holding back. As I held her in my arms, desire and guilt battled within me. Every time I looked into her eyes, I was reminded of the pain I had inflicted on her. We remained silent until I noticed she had fallen asleep in my arms. I felt her nuzzle herself closer, inhaling my scent in her sleep, which brought a smile to my face. Feeling my muscles relax, I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep. When I woke up, I slowly opened my eyes and blinked several times before looking down to see Nora sleeping peacefully in my arms. A smile crept onto my face as I gently kissed her forehead and carefully moved away, resting her head on a pillow. Quietly, I sat on the edge of the bed and reached out to brush a strand of hair away from her face. She looked so serene and beautiful, and I couldn't resist leaning down to place a tender kiss on her lips, quickly pulling away. I quietly got out of bed, trying not to disturb Nora's peaceful sleep. I walked over to the window, opened it, and inhaled the fresh morning air. "You're awake," Nora's voice reached my ears, and I turned to her. "Good morning, Alpha Leo," she greeted and rubbed her face. "How long have you been awake?" she asked. "Not long," I replied and watched her get out of bed. She stretched her arms and yawned, looking slightly disheveled but still beautiful. "Good morning, Nora," I replied, my voice carrying warmth. "I hope you slept well." She nodded and ran a hand through her tousled hair. "Yes, surprisingly well. It must be the comfort of your embrace," she said, a faint blush tinting her cheeks. I couldn't help but smile at her words and watched as she looked away. "I'll go freshen up," she said, and I nodded, observing her pick up some things from her suitcase before entering the bathroom. "You can go in, you know," Ethan spoke, but I scoffed and shook my head. "Don't be ridiculous," I responded and sat back on the bed. Moments later, Nora walked out of the bathroom, fully dressed in a pair of jeans and a button-down top, with a towel in her hand as she dried her hair. "Will you come down for breakfast, or do you want it up here?" I asked, and she fell silent for a moment before responding, "I'll eat downstairs," she said, and I nodded. "Let me shower, and then we can go downstairs," I said, and she nodded before I turned and left the room. After bathing, I returned to the room with a towel wrapped around my waist. The moment she saw me walk in, she stood up. "I'll go downstairs," she said, and before I could object, she turned and quickly left the room. "She is shy," Ethan spoke, but I refused to believe it, knowing that Madison had touched her. "Then why don't you touch her?" Ethan asked, and I didn't give him a response. Instead, I took off the towel, but just then the door opened. I turned and saw the stunned eyes of Nora before she quickly looked away, but it was already too late, she had seen me. "Apologies, I just came back for my phone." "I didn't know you would, there is no need to apologize," I said, and she nodded, went to the bed, and picked up her phone without looking my way. I watched her leave and smiled at her behavior. I got dressed in a pair of blue jeans and a black t-shirt before leaving the room. I went downstairs and went to the dining table where I found Nora seated beside Mother. From the look of it, it seemed they were having a little chat. "Good morning, Mother," I greeted and placed a kiss on Mother's forehead before taking my seat at the edge of the table. Breakfast was already served, and we all began to eat in silence, but on different occasions, I would see Mother's eyes on me. "Say it, Mother," I spoke through the mind link when I couldn't ignore it. "Nothing, I was just wondering why you rejected her in the first place," she spoke through telepathy, and I sighed and chewed slowly, forcing the food down my throat. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said such to you," Mother apologized, and I didn't react to her words. The three of us ate in silence until Mother was finished and decided to leave. "So where are we going?" Nora asked as she dropped her spoon. "Shopping," I announced, and I saw her eyes light up. "You're taking me shopping?" she asked, and I nodded. "That's nice," she responded with a smile, and I smiled back. After we finished eating breakfast, I took the keys from Jackson, my personal driver, and Nora and I drove out of the mansion. We arrived at the shopping mall, and I led Nora inside. "Greetings, Alpha Leo," one of the sales girls greeted as we entered one of the clothing stores. I let Nora browse through the racks while I trailed behind her, watching her with a mixture of amusement and adoration. She picked out several outfits and eagerly tried them on, emerging from the fitting room each time with a smile on her face. As she stepped out in a beautiful floral dress, I couldn't help but feel my breath catch in my throat. She looked absolutely stunning, and I made sure to let her know. "You look amazing, Nora," I said, trailing my eyes all over her. "That dress suits you perfectly." A blush tinged her cheeks as she thanked me, twirling around in front of the mirror to get a better view of herself. I couldn't help but smile, captivated by her infectious happiness. Nora continued trying on different outfits, and each time she came out, I would offer my opinion and shower her with compliments. She seemed to gain more confidence with each outfit she tried, and it was a joy to witness. After she had selected a few dresses, tops, and jeans, we moved on to the accessories section. She tried on different pairs of earrings, necklaces, and bracelets, playfully modeling them for me while I smiled as my heart fluttered in my chest. We also ventured into the shoe section, where Nora couldn't resist trying on a variety of heels, sneakers, and boots. She walked confidently in each pair, making sure to show off her favorites to me. I admired her style and took mental notes of her preferences, making a mental promise to surprise her with something special in the future. As we made our way to the checkout counter, Nora looked at the pile of clothes and accessories in her hands and sighed. "It's much, right?" she asked, and I quickly shook my head. "Nothing is too much for you," I spoke sincerely and watched her smile. As we drove back to the mansion, I couldn't help but steal glances at Nora, who sat beside me, humming a tune and tapping her fingers to the beat. Her infectious energy filled the car, and I couldn't help but feel grateful for having her by my side. "Where else are we going?" she asked, turning her gaze to me. "It's a surprise," I said and saw her frown. "What surprise?" she asked, but I shook my head. "It's a surprise and will remain a surprise," I said, and heard her scoff. I chuckled at her playful annoyance and focused on the road ahead. The drive was silent until I noticed Nora was uncomfortable in her seat, forcing me to look her way. "Are you okay?" I asked and saw her gasp and close her eyes, her breathing becoming heavy. "Nora, what is wrong?" I asked in panic as I stopped the car. "Nora, what is wrong?" I asked, panicking as I saw her clutching her stomach and clenching her teeth. "It's Vera, something is wrong with her," she announced faintly. "Vera?" I asked and saw her nod. "Something is wrong with Vera. Please take me back to my parents' house," she pleaded and opened her eyes, which were filled with tears. "Please hurry up," she pleaded. Nora's POV, "Calm down, we're almost there," Alpha Leo assured me while I took a deep breath with my eyes still closed. The pain in my heart was agonizing, and I wondered what was happening to her. "We are here," Alpha Leo announced, getting out of the car. Before he could reach my side of the car, I opened the door and rushed out, my heart pounding in my chest. I hurriedly made my way to the house and knocked on the door in a panic. After a few knocks, the housekeeper opened the door. "Nora, Alpha Leo," she spoke in shock, slightly lowering her head. "Where is my sister?" I asked in a panic as I stepped inside the house. "She is in her room," the housekeeper responded, closing the door behind us. Quickly, I made my way up the stairs and met my father and mother descending. "Nora, you're here," father spoke in surprise, but I ignored them and hurried to Vera's door. When I tried to open the door, I realized it was locked. "It's locked," I spoke in panic, my heart pounding in my chest. "Vera, Vera, open up!" I shouted, banging on the door with fear. "Nora, step aside, let me break it down," Alpha Leo offered, and I stepped aside, grateful that he was here with me. Alpha Leo stepped forward, prepared to break down the door. The anxiety and fear were overwhelming, and tears welled up in my eyes. I had to see my sister, to make sure she was safe. With one powerful kick, Alpha Leo managed to break open the door, revealing Vera's room. I rushed inside, my heart in my throat, and my eyes scanned the room for any sign of her. The room was dimly lit, and the air felt heavy with tension. And then I saw her, on the floor, wailing and gasping in pain. "Vera!" I yelled and rushed to her. I sat on the floor and cradled her in my arms while tears streamed down my cheeks. She was vomiting blood, and without a second thought, I closed my eyes and began unleashing my abilities. Luckily, it worked. After a while, I opened my eyes and saw her looking at me with tears in her eyes. "She drank poison," Alpha Leo announced, and I shook my head and held Vera's gaze. My once charming twin sister, who radiates an enticing energy whenever she steps in, is now a shadow of herself. My heart ached as I looked into Vera's tear-filled eyes. The sight of her in pain was unbearable. I couldn't comprehend how someone so vibrant and full of life could be reduced to this state. Gently cradling her in my arms, I whispered, "Vera, you're going to be okay," my voice filled with assurance. Her weak gaze met mine, and I could see a mix of pain, fear, and regret in her eyes. It broke my heart to witness her suffering, knowing that she had reached such a desperate point. I wished I could take away her pain, erase the choices that had led her to this moment. "Why did you even think of doing it?" Mother asked in tears. "Why would you wish to kill yourself?" Mother asked, her voice filled with tears, and all Vera did was sob loudly in my arms. She held my gaze and stared at me regretfully in pain. "Why, Nora? Why come for me after all I did to you?" she asked in a low whisper. "Because you are my twin sister," I responded quickly, and I saw her shake her head. "No, I'm not your sister. I don't deserve to be your sister. Sisters don't inflict pain on their sister, sisters don't try to steal their sister's mate," she spoke in regret, while tears welled up in my eyes. "I have wronged you in many ways, Nora, and not even my death can pay up for it," she said, and I shook my head. "I have forgiven you, Vera. I hold no grudges against you," I said, and I saw her close her eyes in pain. "Let me help," Alpha Leo said and carried her from the floor, laying her on the bed. I watched her hold Alpha Leo's gaze as tears streamed down her cheek. "Can you ever forgive me, Alpha Leo?" she asked, and Alpha Leo didn't give an answer. "I knew you were falling for Nora and decided to trick you into sleeping with me, knowing you were drunk and mistook me for her. I'm so sorry," she apologized sincerely. Tears streamed down Vera's face as she looked at Alpha Leo, waiting for his response. The room was filled with heavy silence as he processed Vera's words. I could see the anger and hurt in his eyes, but I also saw a glimmer of compassion. "Who am I not to forgive you, Vera?" Alpha Leo finally spoke, his voice filled with a mix of emotions. "What you did was incredibly wrong and hurtful. But I have also wronged someone," he said, looking my way. "And I do hope that we get past all this," he said and left the room. I looked at Vera, whose eyes were filled with tears and pain. "It's okay. Everything will be fine," I told her, and she shook her head. "Nora, nothing can go back the same. I feel suffocated, and it looks like death is the only way." "Death isn't the solution, Vera," I interrupted, my voice filled with care. "I know things seem unbearable right now, but there's always a way to heal, to find hope and happiness again. We'll face this together, as sisters." I gently wiped away the tears from Vera's face. Deep down, I knew that forgiving her and helping her heal would be a long and difficult process, but I couldn't abandon her in her darkest hour. "Thank you, Nora," she said, and I nodded before rising to my feet. I glanced in my mother's direction. She was crying silently. "Stop crying. She needs us right now," I said, and my mother nodded. "I will be back tomorrow morning to check on her. Please keep an eye on her," I told Mother, who nodded. "I will take my leave," I said and turned to leave. I stepped out of the room and took the stairs to the living room before leaving the house. There, I met Alpha Leo standing beside his car with folded arms. We held each other's gaze as I approached him. He wore an expressionless look on his face, which made it difficult for me to discern his mood. "Are you okay?" he asked, and I nodded, but then felt a sharp pain in my stomach. "It's the poison. You have to lay in bed and heal yourself," Lolita announced. "Something is wrong with you," Alpha Leo spoke with concern, and I sighed. "I'm sorry, Alpha Leo, but I need to rest in bed and heal myself," I said, and he nodded. He quickly opened the door for me, helped me get in, and closed the door before starting the car. The drive was silent as I closed my eyes and pondered. Vera's words buzzed in my head, and out of curiosity, I opened my mouth to speak. "About what Vera said, was she right? That you were falling for me?" I asked, and Alpha Leo remained silent for a moment before responding. "I began falling for you the day I spent time with you in the orphanage, but I was a fool, and I'm paying for it," he spoke with regret, while I gulped and looked away. Without being told, I knew he regretted his actions and decisions, but things were now complicated with Lord Madison in the picture. The car pulled up to the mansion, and Alpha Leo helped me out of the car, unexpectedly carrying me in his arms. "What are you doing?" I asked, dumbfounded by his action and how easily he carried me up. "What does it look like I'm doing?" he asked with a warm smile, and I couldn't hold back my smile as I wrapped my arms around his neck. "Hold on tight," he said and led us inside the sitting room. I could feel the intrigued eyes of the security guards on us, and shyly, I buried my head in his chest. As we entered the sitting room, I could feel the gaze of the servants on us, but I couldn't bring myself to look up. I nestled my head against Alpha Leo's chest, feeling both comforted and embarrassed by the attention. His soft chuckle only made me blush even more. "Don't tell me you're shy," he teased, and I shook my head slightly, my cheeks turning a deeper shade of red. I just didn't expect to be carried like this," I mumbled, my voice barely audible. He chuckled again, his arms tightening around me slightly. "Well, get used to it because I'll always be here to carry you whenever you need me to." His words sent a warm sensation through my body, and I couldn't help but feel so comfortable in his arms. Alpha Leo carried me to his room, carefully setting me down on the bed. I could see the concern in his eyes as he looked at me, his expression softening. "Are you sure you'll be all right?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine worry. I nodded, trying to push through the pain in my stomach. "I'll be fine. It's just going to take some time to heal." He reached out and brushed a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch gentle and comforting. "If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know." "Maybe there is something you could do," I said, and he nodded his head, urging me to continue. "Maybe I could lie in your arms while I heal myself," I said, and saw his eyes light up at my words. "Alpha Leo's POV, are you sure about it?" I asked to be sure I heard her right. "Yes, but it's okay if you don't want to," she said, but I quickly shook my head and squatted before her. "I want to," I said, cupped her cheeks, and placed a kiss on her forehead before leading her to the bed. We both lay on the bed while she lay beside me and rested her head on my chest. Mine. My wolf howled in excitement while I took a deep breath to inhale her fascinating scents. Calm down, your heart is racing, she teased. With a tender smile, I pressed my lips against her forehead, savoring the softness of her skin. It's always like this when you're near me, I confessed, my voice filled with a mixture of awe and adoration. Being with her felt like coming home, like finding the missing piece of my soul. We both remained silent for a moment before she spoke. I love your arms. It feels like the safest place in the world, she announced, causing me to smile. I can't just explain it, she mumbled and sniffed deeply, probably taking my scent, causing me to chuckle. I also like you in my arms, I announced, and she lifted her head to hold my gaze. Tell me, what other things do you like? She flirted with a smile. What do you want to hear? I asked, and she shrugged her shoulders, waiting for me to speak. I looked into her eyes, captivated by her playful expression. The love and desire I felt for her surged through my veins, making it difficult to gather my thoughts. I'm waiting, she said, and I smiled before speaking. I love your smile. It's so genuine, I said and received a big smile from her. I love your eyes. They always remind me of the sea, I said, and she blushed and looked away. I love your puffy cheeks, I said and cupped her cheek with both hands before pulling away. I moved closer and stared at her lips. Kiss her, Ethan urged, but I kicked against it. I placed my hands on her lips and gently caressed them as I watched her close her eyes. I love your lips, I said and took my hands away. I saw her open her eyes and noticed a mixture of emotions in her gaze. As I gazed into her eyes, I could see a mixture of emotions swirling within them. There was love, desire, and a hint of vulnerability. It was a beautiful sight, and it made my heart skip a beat. I love how your eyes reflect so much of what you feel, I whispered, my voice filled with sincerity. A soft blush spread across her cheeks, and she bit her lip, a gesture that never failed to drive me crazy. Go on, she encouraged, her voice barely a whisper. I love the way you challenge me, I continued, my voice growing husky with desire. You push me to be the best version of myself, and you make me see the world from a different perspective. Her fingers gently traced circles on my chest, and she leaned in closer, her breath brushing against my cheek. Tell me more, she whispered, her voice filled with longing. I moved my hand and traced it down to her and gently squeezed it, eliciting a soft moan from her as she closed her eyes. I love you. I love how soft they are. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.